Thank you very much. I hope you don't mind if I kind of walk around a little bit. I can't sit behind a lantern. Sorry about that. I was as a student, even in school, I couldn't sit still. So, anyway, thank you so much. I mean, you guys are amazing. I've had just a wonderful 3 days here, getting to know you and being back to KK. I've been here many times in my life. They introduced me from Portland, but I've had a studio in Singapore for almost 25 years. Singapore and Bangkok. So I am familiar a little bit with Asia and the Asian persuasion, and try to be as sensitive to it as possible. And so I'm going to show you a few things, but I think, the amazing thing is I just wanted to say thank you for having this and getting, all these architects and designers together. It's quite amazing, isn't it? I mean, we don't have that. It's not a great life, really, as an architect. I mean, think about it. I mean, our business, fame and fortune, do we always get it? Probably not, right? And the prestige, right? The big fees, the great economy that's always surrounding us, not so easy, right? I mean, and we get clients, right, that give us this thing, oh, we want something grand, right? You hear that? Of course, every time, right? Grand. And you give them grand. And what do they say? Cheap and good law. We want cheap and good, right? So it's not easy being an architect, but yet, here we are, and if I could say to any of you, it's probably you wouldn't do anything else in your life. It's amazing, this career, right, that we've all chosen. It's amazing. And here we are. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I am an architect that's a little more on the emotional side, as you can tell. I'm artistic, and I try to follow that and then mix it with a little bit of technology. Right? So I hope what I say today will help all of you, give you a little insight as to how I work. The theme of elements here, I believe in going to the very, very basic elements. As we talk, I think one of the most important things is the traditions and the history and the stories that make architecture great. Doesn't mean it can't be packaged in a beautifully contemporary building or a contemporary space or using the latest materials, but we start with our traditions. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. Okay? So building with soul. Building is not necessarily a building. It's talking about the process of building and creation. Now I have to work with technology, which is not my forte. But there. Okay, when I was in student, I couldn't even get into architecture school. I didn't qualify. I had a heck of a time. And I almost thought I wasn't going to make it. And then I saw a story. It was actually a TV show about I.M.Pei. And I.M.Pei was building, this is the National Museum of Art in Washington, D.C. It's the east wing of that. And I.M.Pei, and it had a whole special, and it showed how he drew and all the difficulty he had to go through all the building departments and through all the stuff. But the thing that impressed me most was that before they started construction, he has this meeting with all the contractors, the security guards, with all the people that were involved, the operators, the curators of the museum. And he says, basically, I need your help. American people, have been laughed at in the world for many years because we're not culturally, we're cowboys, right? We've been thought of but we're trying to create something of culture, a place where Americans can come and learn about art and be inspired. And he talked to these contractors and he said, the cement, the concrete guys and the steel workers, we're all looking at this little Asian American architect talking to them, kind of laughing at him, really. And he said, but I need your help. You guys were asked here because you're the best in the business, and I want to make sure that our kids and our grandkids, can see something of importance, and we're all going to work together to make it special. And the amazing thing is you see these guys that are, like really, steel workers, right? But at the end, they're saying, yeah, You know, they change their whole attitude. And they start high-fiving each other and start saying, yeah, we're family. You know, we're going to do this. And it's amazing the result that they got. And so it was the process. And it was led by the architect. And I said at that point, I want to be that guy. I want to be the guy that inspires these guys, these steel workers, to be sensitive and to say, yeah, we want to do something for our families. Right? It's quite beautiful. Then at the end of the show, they show how all the trouble they went to build this thing, how much difficulty they had. And then they showed the people. On opening day, they had cut the ribbon, and all the people are going to run into this thing and see this thing. They got lines all around Washington, D.C. to get in. And so the first group, you know, they cut it, and the guys come in, and it's almost like a cartoon. People start banging into each other because the first person just stops and says, you know, and makes this face. And I said, he got them. You know, he touched some people at a level which was so beautiful, so deep. And you just saw these people just amazed. You know, all the arts and all the things. It was just amazing. So anyway, those two things said to me why I wanted to be an architect. Right? And I hope all of you have this similar kind of feeling. It doesn't always make sense. It's not rational why we go through all this stuff, these long hours and all this stuff, the bad economies to try to do what we do. But I think it's worth it. Now, this is me. This is my office. This was in Bangkok and in Singapore. We had some offices. And I always called myself an artisan as well as an architect because I felt like the craft of the job kind of needed to be expressed. And so our office was about drawing. And I think drawing is an important part. Yes, thank you. A part. And it's an expression. So whether you draw with a computer, whether you draw with your hands, I think it's the way you draw, the way you express. And I have this belief that if you give a drawing and you cared about it and do this beautiful sketch, and you give it to the contractor, somehow the contractor realizes that you put a lot of love into that sketch. If he sees that, then of course he puts a little extra love into that building. Somehow it gets into the structure, right? And through that, people recognize it when they come in. They say, I don't know what it is about this building, but it just feels good, right? Feels better. And then the people feeling better help other people feel better, and it's a big, beautiful world just because we made a nice drawing. That's pretty amazing, huh? So anyway, that's my belief. And in my office, we have these office meetings every week. And I don't know if you can see this, but I've got Tajangaru is one of the jobs that we were doing this particular week in our thing. And so we were always talking about that. I have a very small studio. We only had probably 8 people in the office. I had actually maybe 4 in Bangkok and 6, maybe the maximum 8 in Singapore. But we managed to do a lot of work. And we were always doing stuff. Mostly small stuff, but it was lots of fun. And so we always drew things by hand. And so you'll see on all my stuff, there's frogs everywhere. And why would I show a frog? And why do I have frogs and anything? This one is hidden potential. It's the magic of the frog, right? Because a frog is not a really beautiful creature, right? It's kind of slimy and whatever. But if you kiss a frog, if you're lucky enough to really care and kiss, what can happen? King, huh? It can turn into royalty. So we use this as a metaphor for our office. We said, hey, you know, we got clients, we've got sites that aren't always so beautiful, we've got things, projects we don't necessarily want to do, but if we care, if we kiss our frog, we kiss that site, whatever, magic can happen. Also, I love frogs because when it rains, which it happens a lot here, it seems, they sing. Frogs sing in the rain. Isn't that amazing? They're beautiful creatures, right? And the other thing is they're very sensitive. The French used to have the frog on their warring flag because they used to carry frogs with them into battle, namely because the easiest way to stop an advancing army is to poison the water. Frogs are very sensitive. They absorb water through their skin, right? And so any poison or anything they sense right away. And frogs actually saved many of the French armies as both the food, the water, and other things to prevent them from actually dying. The frogs will die very quickly, which is unfortunate because now we lose lots of frogs. There's over 5,000 species of frogs, of which 50 they say, are being lost every year. So you know how many years we've got of frogs left? Less than 100. Okay, so I write stories about frogs, and somehow I write stories. Okay, I always write stories, and this is what I want to talk to you about today. So this story came about because I was I couldn't understand something, and sometimes when I don't understand something, I have to write a story about it. And so this was a misunderstanding apparently, and so America started shooting missiles at Afghanistan because of this. And so I thought, well, how do I understand that kind of behavior? And so I wrote a story, and then I sent it to President Bush, thinking that he would stop the war, right? When as soon as he understood that, you know, we're all just kind of different. Doesn't mean we're right or wrong or whatever. We don't need to kill people just because we disagree with them, right? Or because we have a different way. So I wrote this story. I tried to make sense out of it. This, at the bottom right corner, is an American bullfrog, right? So he's a tough one. He's always trying to pick fights with everybody, big bully in the fish pond or in the frog pond. And so in the end, it wasn't because all the water had dried up and all these frogs were all fighting each other, and it was only because of this little tadpole that was turning into a frog, croaked, made a sound. They all remembered who they kind of were, and then they all started living again harmoniously and started singing in a multicultural, multi-national kind of way. And so this story kind of helped me kind of feel a little better that somehow we need to put things in a proper perspective. Unfortunately, Bush didn't read the letter apparently, or he never got it one way or another, and we're still in Afghanistan, right? Which is sad. I wrote stories about amazing creatures and amazing things. The amazing little coconut. I wrote stories, and this was when I was in Singapore, because in Singapore in the 90s and in the early 2000s, there was a very paternal kind of way that they said, oh, a good Singaporean acts like this and does this. And so I wrote a story in the Year of the Rat about rat and wrong, right and wrong, and tried to understand again about making exceptions to all these silly rules that the government always tried to do. How can I help? A story about a pine cone that leaves its tree to become a tree itself to help Father Tree fall down gently into the forest. And then I used these notes to write to my friends and to people that I cared about. And it's a little different than sending an email. And this was my total marketing process. This is a story I want to tell you about. This is a story. And you're asking me, why are you telling so many stories? Well, I'll tell you in a minute, okay? That's another story. But this was a Chinese New Year card. It was in the Year of the Pig, and I wrote a story about a Chinese tea maker, right? In the Year of the Pig, and he had the double golden tea house, right? And it was Tea Maker Cha. Tea Maker Cha made tea just like his father, and his father before him, and his father before him. And so it was a very important day. Tea Maker Cha was going to pass on this tradition to his son. He was going to tell his son how to make this tea, right? Pass on this tradition. But that particular day, the son is sick. Can't get out of bed. The wife yells at the father, do something, right? You know, typical Asian family. The husband doesn't know what to do except go down and make tea. So he makes tea for his son. He comes up, he gives his son a cup of tea, and what happens? The son says it tastes different, jumps out of bed, he's healthy. What happened? So the wife says, tastes it as well. She notices it tastes different than the normal cha maker cha tea, and goes out and sells it in the streets for many times what she usually charges for the tea. She comes back and she tells tea maker Cha, make that miracle tea again tomorrow because we want to make more money, right? So tea maker Cha has no idea what the difference was. He makes the tea the same. He makes it every day. Why was it different this time when he made it for his son, right? So he cannot figure out how to make the tea differently. And so the wife thinks the husband's holding out on it, right? She thinks something's up. He doesn't want to share this special tea recipe. So she next morning says, oh, surely I shall die by night's end if I don't have a taste of that miracle tea. Tea maker Cha runs down to the kitchen, makes a batch of tea just like he always makes a batch of tea. She takes one sip, she notices a big difference, and off she goes out into the streets to make lots of money selling this tea. Now, Tea Maker Cha can never, ever make tea like this again. But there was a difference. What was the difference? It was his love, his concern for his loved ones that overflows into the tea. That is the metaphor for which my office works. This is how I always tried to explain and help people to understand that caring, really caring, can change anything. And that, I hope, is the secret that we'll all be able to carry with us. So anytime I needed in the office, I needed to tell people that this presentation was very important or this client is very important, I'd go around and I'd bang on our teapot, right? And I'd say, it's time for miracle tea. And I'd go in the kitchen and make some miracle tea for the staff, right? That was the symbol that time is to do something exceptional is about to happen. Okay. So anyway, most times people would never know about me, and that's okay for me. And so one day I was in the Changi airport, flying out somewhere. I said, hey, that's my work right there on the cover of a book. I said, that's amazing. And I don't even remember getting an interview or anything, So I checked it, Design Media. This was printed in Shanghai. And the architect, this is one of the Shangri-La projects that we did in Rasa Sentosa in Penang. You might recognize it. And so I wasn't even given credit for it. It was some Chinese company apparently that did it. I didn't even know about it. So I managed to stay definitely under the radar, right? But every once in a while I win something or I get involved in something. And so this was something that I got to do. And thank goodness to a lot of good clients that we've had. But Shangri-La has been very good to me. It's given me work throughout the years, and I'm very thankful for that, as well as many clients. And one of the reasons why I actually get clients that come back is because I tell stories. It's amazing, right? So, and then one time, and look at this, I got second. Oh, it says top 10, and I got second. Ah, man. So I was really, no, I didn't care. But you know who got first? Bill Bensley. So it's okay, I guess. It was somebody, a big shot anyway, but it's fun. Now, not only do I tell stories, I do funny little cartoons. And I try to draw so it's not so serious. But do you know, this was a spa that I designed for the Emir of Qatar. So, to get a sitting with this person is also amazing, right? And so we were doing a spa for one of his palaces, for his beach palace, right? And I show him a drawing like this. And at first, he has an architect. He's got a whole group of engineers that judge what you're doing and looking and all this stuff. And so they looked at it and they said, "There's no way we can show this to the Emir. This is not serious. You got to be serious." So I showed him, these are really long drawings, and to me, these express everything I wanted to show, and I wanted to explain about the thing. And then I told him a story about a little boy who knew everything, who was always very clever and very smart. But somehow he grew up into this guy and he had this presence. And so he needs a place to go where he can take away that old man that knows everything, to get to the essence of the child who is really in charge of all the secrets and can do things with compassion and love for his people. Well, it's a metaphor for him, obviously. And so I said, this is the place where you can be your best self, to make your best decisions for your own people, for the government, for the Middle East, for all these different things. And so he turned to his advisor and he said, this man will get the job. No one could believe it. And I was telling a silly story with the silly cartoons. And that's how I got some work. Now, this started in 1995 or 96, I think is the date on that sketch. This was a sketch for Sentosa. If you've ever been to Singapore and you go to Sentosa now, there's Universal Studios and a bunch of stuff, right? Back then, it was an army camp, and it had 2 hotels and something else, but there wasn't much, right? So I showed this because I had a Chinese client, Mr. Tan, owned this little, it was like an ugly nursery, and it was supposed to be an orchid garden, and you were going to charge money to go in. But it was the messiest nursery that you've ever seen. And so I said, okay, well, you need a gift store, you need a few things, but we're going to do this cheaply so that you can enhance your sales right away by creating places where wedding brides or families can go and have their picture taken, and everybody can learn about orchids. So I went and I showed this sketch to Father Tan, who and he says, "Oh, my brother is the contractor who's going to build this. You need to talk to him." So he says, Tan, come forward. And so Tan comes out and he sees an American Angmo, right? And he says, his first thing was, he made that sound, that means he doesn't really respect you, that one. And but we started talking, and through simple cartoon drawings, he knew exactly, his English was terrible, but yet he knew exactly what I wanted to do. And he saw the heart that I was trying to do something very inexpensive ideas, cheap and good, basically, to try to help them upsell their product. And so it worked. Okay? I do a lot of drawings. I can't talk about all these things, but this was a client in Thailand who owned a big hotel, and he was Marriott wanted to turn it into a Marriott resort, and he really wanted to keep his style into it because he built this thing, and this was his. And so, what we did was, he was a real haberdasher. He had shell collections, all kinds of stuff. So what we did was we made a story about him being this great collector of traditional crafts. And so the whole hotel now is full of all these handmade, beautiful things. And one of the amazing things is fishing poles. In Thailand, they used to spend so much time fishing and not catching anything that they would do these beautiful carvings, right? And it's amazing how beautiful those things are. So now, if you check out Emerald Bay, I think it's Emerald Bay Marriott Hotel, you'll look in their atrium. In the atrium that you enter, there's this huge empty roof that was filled with nothing but fishing poles, all lighted, and everything. It's just amazing. So simple things, simple ideas, simple crafts. You don't lose the tradition. You don't lose those textures, those elements of life, even though you're doing a contemporary operation. Okay, this one was a story about I did a surfing resort in Maldives, which is called Tanah Barudu. Tanah Barudu is an island, and so it had two of the world's top waves for surfers. Okay, they have the top 10. They had two of them. Okay, the Sultan's Break and one other one, and so it's a very important place. And so we were supposed to do a scheme for that, and so in doing so, the day before I arrived to give the presentation, one of the guys said, "Hey, I want to warn you. We want to do everything in canvas roofs." I said, "Canvas roofs? I don't know how we control light, He said, "Never mind, because surfers get up early and they spend all day in the water, and so they'll never have any problem with light or whatever. So just try to do something." So that night in the hotel, I did these drawings that basically changed all my thinking into canvas roofs, right? But I had to tell a story. Why in the world would you be using canvas roofs? So there happens to be a story that there is a special sea foam. When you have waves, when the action to create for surfing, it creates a weird bubble. And so surfers or people in the know can look at the beach and see a sea foam, and they say the surf is really good for surfing. And so I named this sea foam. We did a different thing, and the whole metaphor was that these are bubbles of foam around the island to make it relevant to that. Now, in this particular case, okay, we can all say that, well, we understand that creatures, certain animals are endangered, and it's important to save them. And so lots of places adopt animals, right, and create these things and whatever. And so this is the hawksbill turtle. Now, what we did, now you can say that, and as a corporate sponsor, you can say, I give thousands of dollars to this conservation thing. But what we did was, we had to personalize the story, okay? So, because if you don't personalize the story of the turtle, it's tragic that these hawkbills are disappearing. So what we did was we started creating these cute little details. But it wasn't the cute little details, it relates to a story. And so what we did was we created a story this is in Burma, by the way, and it's for a small hotel company that just does local hotels. They do a really nice job. They're about 3-star hotels. And they create this nice local kind of feel. So we were trying to use material on this site that's very cheap, so that's stone from the material to create their big signboard. Those are basically poles that we're using in the construction, so they could create this big signboard. But that's not what I was talking about. It's the story. And so how do we make the hawksbill turtle, an important part? And so this little girl, this little Burmese girl, Mint was her name, used to go to the beach every day to look out because she was stuck on this little island in Burma and she wanted to see the world. So she wanted to be an adventurer. So she'd go there, and this particular day she saw a hawk-billed turtle kind of come up and try to get through up the beach, and there was a bunch of branches and things in front. So she moved it out and she watched this creature, this beautiful creature move and kind of dig away the sand and then start to lay eggs, right? Amazing process. So one of the fishermen comes up and he's seen the whole process, and it's tradition, of course, in Burma and in a lot of places, maybe East Malaysia, that maybe you might want to make soup out of the turtle and eat the eggs, right? You know, I mean, it happens, right? It was a tradition, right? You know, and so, but this time the little Mint says, no, 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 here, take this papaya. This is a lucky papaya, and don't take the turtle. This will bring you lots of fish tomorrow, so whatever. And off he went. But the next day, other fishermen came up looking to salvage the eggs, take the eggs, and Mint said, oh, no, no, this is Wendy's turtle, or she was the mother of this thing. And she kind of, you personalize it, right? And so then this Mint girl thinks, oh, I should protect these eggs until it's time. And so, because the turtle represents, of course, what she can't have. She wants independence. She wants to go out into the ocean like they. And so she's protecting these little eggs until the hatchlings can go, and she has to chase away the birds, the seagulls, and the dogs on the beach to make sure they get safely in, and they make that journey that she cannot, right? But when the hotel then opens and it says Mint is in charge of the kids club or in charge of the dive center or in charge of something, then you have this special feeling about turtles, right? And so as we're doing this, we design things, okay, we have these cute little details which kind of say, okay, there's something about hawk-billed turtles or the hawks-billed turtles, but we create these different things, and in the end, you have a place which goes out to the beach where you can observe turtles. You can keep the people off the beach from damaging it. You can do lighting and other things that don't disturb the turtles' nesting areas, and yet you can educate people so that they aren't the people that are eating the eggs in the future, right? So, and this is kind of the kind of projects that we work on, and we kind of extend the stories to do that. Okay? Now these are some of my projects. This you can recognize, but we haven't seen the sunset here in a while, so that is a sunset from the Chi Spa, just in this hotel here. We designed the Chi Spa as well, and for the lobby and what have you. We've done many buildings here, and we've always tried to tell stories, right? This happens to be the Sunset Bar, which again, we can see the shell of this building, but no sunsets to accompany it for the past few days. But it's still there. We designed that. That was my first sketch of it. And it's basically true to that sketch, very much so. And so you can see we were talking to the contractor and trying to figure out how to do the wind, the protection in the wind. We changed the light feature to a giant dugout canoe, that they have in there now. But for the most part, it was built pretty much like that. And then we had the sitting along the side because, we were talking about how we wanted to engage everybody into the ocean and whatever before they watch the sunset, and there's plenty of places to have drinks. And son of a gun, it happened, right? But this is a small part. I mean, this is a very popular place for drinks, right, in a.k.a. Now, however, let me go back one first. There is a story, though, about Coco Joe. Now, we designed Coco Joe's restaurant, which is also on the beach. Actually, we didn't design it. We kind of renovated. There was an old shell there of a building, right? We renovated that. We did the Chi Spa. We did the Marine Center. And we did the Sunset Bar, right? But there's a story about Coco Joe. Does anybody know who Coco Joe was? Has anybody eaten at Coco Joe's? On the beach here, right? It's right here, okay? Coco Joe was one of the workers that built this hotel. Okay, Coco Joe was from the story, he was a Hakka Chinese. He married a Malay Muslim. He kind of semi-converted. He was like one of the most favorite workers here. His wife made this incredible coconut cake, the a.k.a., right? And he used to bring it And all the workers loved working with Cocoa Joe because he'd always share this beautiful coconut quay, right? And every Friday, because he was kind of a converted Muslim, but he couldn't spend time praying all the time, he would take Friday at sunset and have a prayer, and then he would have a big barbecue with all the co-workers, right? They said that this hotel was built faster, it was built of better quality, it was built in an amazing amount of shorter time, and everybody was quite happy working here on this particular hotel, and they accredited it to Cocoa Joe, right? Just because he was such a nice guy, and they had a big barbecue every Friday. So Shangri-La was smart enough to say, that's kind of a nice thing, why don't we kind of keep that happening? And so they created Cocoa Joe's on the beach, right? And so now you can go there and you can still have, when the weather permitting, of course, and you get a beautiful sunset and you appreciate life. And now the story then goes even farther, and it says that the sunsets were never as beautiful in Koto Kinabalu at this point until Cocoa Joe. It's because of his constant prayers, right? It's because he appreciated the sunset so much, he loved it, and all of them came to appreciate it, that it's that appreciation. God puts a little extra into the clouds for you guys here at KK because of that appreciation, which is also nice. Now, I was working in Cartoon Network. Cartoon Network has a water park. I don't know if you know this, in Thailand, okay? And so Cartoon Network is based in Hong Kong. It's part of Turner Broadcasting, and it's a lot of fun. And so this is what you see kind of when you enter, this giant maze of stuff. And this is it. Now, it was built kind of like an Asian-style water park, even though it's an international brand. So it has some problems, okay? There's a lot of concrete on the floor, right? It's very hot. It's kind of dangerous, some parts and some other things. So what they did was they hired me to come in and kind of talk and add some stories. So we were going to add something right there in the center around the surf pool, because it was just a box, right, in the middle of the thing. And so we did that, but I told them the story of Cocoa Joe. And I said, you really need a character, because this is Cartoon Network. We need lots of characters here. And you need someone who's a good guy, someone who's a real great host, who talks Thai but also talks English and can entertain the guests and give you great coconuts. And so he's going to sell coconuts and whatever, but it's packaged nicely. And they said, well, we got a lot of cartoon characters already. Why don't we use one of the ones that we have? So we went through and we worked through a story. We did a master plan for the Cartoon Network. This is the dry park opposite with hotels and with everything. This is the drive down to there. I mean, you have to go through these things. This is the signage in the airport when you get them. Because we were going to try to rebrand the whole city, because right now, Pattaya, where this Cartoon Network is located, is in an area where the U.S. military used to be for R&R. So that means there's lots of bars, there's lots of places which are a bit seedy. And so we were trying to change the whole reputation. So what we did was we said, okay, well, first thing is we need some big signs, and Pepsi was obviously the sponsor here, and so we did that. And so trying to create some of the energy and the thing, and you got Tom and Jerry, and you got all these great things, but you need places for selfies, right? And even if you got to have things to take home, right, that relate to the sign. So and so we went through this whole thing. You need big signage and things, because you're a kid again, right? And so it's got to be wild and fun and whatever. And so we did this whole thing. This is one of the soda tosa. This is a special place to make a soda fountain drink, a root beer float, a whatever. But it was a special machine that did that with Pepsi. And then we created this great surf arena, which was just a big sighting, and you can't really see it, but right there, okay, let's see here, technology, I don't see it anyway, but right there in the middle is this giant water disco where everybody's having a great time dancing and playing in the surf pool, right? So it became a big thing, a big Polynesian thing. And we actually themed it around this guy, right? Because this is the guy that they wanted to. And so he wasn't really a good, great role model as far as a lot of people thought, but what we had to do was make his heart really big. And then we were able to not only create it and put tattoos on the floor to try to make it more interesting, But we made this great little enclosure for him, and then he hosted the Polynesian luau's and whatever that was going on there. So, and it was a lot of fun, and you can see at night it's just a great center, and there are actually water discos that kind of continue through the night. I got to do lots of other fun things. That's Courage, the dog, as well in this hotel that we were creating using the Cartoon Network grid by using prefabrication and a balloon that goes up and down so you can look out over the whole thing. We did a giant surfboard and a different thing. We did even wind chimes that for the hotel using Asian coconuts. And then we created this hotel for them, which was a giant water. Actually, this thing in the bottom here is this is a water purification device, and then it's a giant wave pool. So it's this massive thing. And we were pumping in seawater because it's right on the ocean. So we were cleaning the Thai Ocean, the sea there, filtering it, then pumping it. And the reason we were doing that was so that we could create a new ocean, basically. And we were creating this whole thing, and what I wanted to do was design, okay, this is the master plan of that particular area, that's the funny looking shaped croissant at the top that's doing all the pumping. And then this whole thing was a new ocean. You can see there's a giant fish hotel at the bottom which goes underwater, and you get this whole living reef, this riparian kind of reef, by creating this artificial substance. So anyway, it was a lot of fun. And so is even doing trash cans. This is Chowder, who eats everything, so we thought, why not, after you eat, you throw away things through Chowder. Now, this is the real project, okay, and I only have an hour, and I don't know how far I am, but I'm pretty close, so I got to get to the real building stuff, right? We should talk about architecture, shouldn't we, since we're here? But this is Tajangaru. This is right here. This is the Chi Spa. And so we designed the Chi Spa for Shangri-La. We did almost all the Chi Spas early on. And we worked with them to kind of create a story for the Chi Spa. There it is now, right? And it's mostly a park. What we try to do, Shangri-La started into the spa movement quite late compared to most. And most had pampering spas. And so what we wanted to do is do a little different. And so I wrote a story about little Diego, and because we were building the first spa in Philippines. And so I said, okay, let's tell a story about a little Filipino boy. So little Diego, he's never at peace. This boy was born, he's been crying since he was born, right? And as an Asian mother, you're not going to accept that. You're going to go and you're going to try to find. So she went to the fortune tellers, she went to the temples, she went everywhere trying to find why her son was always crying and why he was never at peace. And so finally she heard a story about this guy from the Himalayas, right, which is where Shangri-La is from. Now, does everybody know the story of Lost Horizon? You've all read Lost Horizons? Thank you. Good. So Lost Horizon is a story by James Hilton. If you haven't read that, oh, that's a fantastic book about utopia, written in the 30s and 40s. I mean, it's amazing about the Himalayas, and there's this magical place called Shangri-La where you never age and art is the center of the universe. It's fantastic, right? You got to read that book. It's James Hilton. So anyway, that's what Shangri-La hotel name and story is about, right? So it's a Himalayan. So we took this idea. And so the idea of this Himalayan mystique and all these things, but we had to write a story that was local for the Philippines. So this lady, right, has little Diego, and she's trying to find out why he's always crying. She goes to this Chinese garden, really, where this guy works, this Highlander from China works, and little Diego stops crying. And he finds that there's a peace in the garden that, is soothing. Right? And so that's the story of this particular spa is that it is more about the landscape instead of just getting a nice massage, right? So you go to this place, and it's the beauty of the place, not necessarily the spa treatment itself, right? And we called it's chi, but we called it energy because the idea was that it's not about getting a pamper, getting a one-time massage where you feel good for a few hours, you sleep it away. The idea was to give something that is liberating, something that that takes away pain and takes away whatever and gives vitality and health, and again, makes you the best person that you can ever be. So our forms and our architecture was a little more dynamic, and yet sometimes it was very soothing, right? But other times it was dynamic, and this was created. I went to Prague to get custom glass made. This is the Chispa in Cebu. This was our first one in Philippines, and that was the original sketch, and darn close. The actual thing, that's 9-meter chandelier, by the way. And the idea here is not only to create a place which makes you relax, it's a place to create vitality and to give you stimulation, right? So when you walk into this is the inner sanctum, okay? So this is where you go to sign up for treatments, right? This is just the lobby, basically. And so when you go in there, the idea is, in life, we're always looking like this, right? We're always playing with our hand phones. And so the idea is to get you so that hopefully you look up. Hopefully, you do that effect that I was talking about that a.k.a. created, this, right? Because when you get people in that state, then when you give them a massage, then when you give them a treatment, they are ready for miracles, right? It's a different way of appearing. When you're always focused on your phone and everything, you got all this stuff worrying about paying bills as an architect, right? How in the world can you relax? But if you have an event which causes you to, it changes things. You're ready for an experience. Okay, and so you can see that for Shangri-La, we spend a lot on grass, plants, greenery, and water features, right? And actually, a large part of that space is actually for staff, because they also take good care of their staff to make sure that the staff are happy. Because if you're happy as someone that's doing a treatment, when you're touching people, it's goodness that's going into them, not stress, right? So we have to make sure that the staff are very happy, right? And so you can see, this is the outside. This is as you enter in Boracay in Philippines. It's mostly a natural kind of experience, right? Okay, now here's where the stories start to happen. Okay, so we did a competition for a resort in Maldives, and this was for Olivelle, all right? So it was a family resort. And of course, we're going to tell a story. And this was the story of Harmony, okay, Harmony the fish. And okay, so if you go to Harmony, everything in Divihi, in the language of the Maldivians, ends in I's. So that's why it's Harmony with an I. And that's a giant fish. And so what happens is here you can see is that this is little Hussein. And one day he goes fishing with his father, and unfortunately the storms come up, he falls into the ocean, and the father can't save him. There you see what a painful, moment that is. But there's this big fish called Harmony, it takes it in his mouth, and it's going to basically take him to an island, which happens to be, of course, the island we're building this resort on, right? And so we have Harmony coming in and beaching himself and spitting the boy out safely on the island. So then little Hussein, is so small he can't push the fish back into the water. And the fish says, well, it's okay. I'm an old fish. But take care of my children, right? You have a story like that. Then all of a sudden, think about what your dive center can do. Think about what your conservation, think about the seafood restaurant, what you serve even. It changes the way, and you use that. And so when we have the dive center, we have Hussein working in the dive center. And that changes the way. So it changes our architecture as well. So, okay, this is some of our competition. We did fake postcards. We did, to pretend like it was an existing resort for a competition. We did slides and pictures of all these great things that you were going to get. And isn't that a beautiful smile? Gosh, the Maldivian, isn't it great? So, we had all these things about harmony and culture and different things. And then here's the island development. And can you see there's a fish in the path? So we left a monument to harmony, right? And what's at the heart of the fish? Can you guess? Kids Club, right? Conservation Kids Club. So you can even see it from the sky when you fly over. But when you enter, what we did was we took, one thing, unfortunately, when you build in the Maldives and it's a dense island, you're going to have palm trees that get sacrificed because they grow at 4 meters on center, right? Typically when they drop down, as you know, the plantations. And so we got lots of palm trees. So we used the palm trees to create what? A fish rib cage. So you're always kind of remembering that there was a sacrifice that was made in order for you guys to have a great time at this resort, right? And so it's appreciation. And it's a respect, basically, for that. And we tried to use it. And we even changed the traditional building to kind of have this curved form so it kind of matched the thing. But you have lots of, here, Lo Hussein's Dive Shop, right? Because you don't want to forget about Lo Hussein. And you got all these opportunities for kids to really understand. Now the story has passion, right? This is, Little Hussein was saved, right? So, and I tried to use fish stories in many cases. This was in Shangri-La in the Maldives. So, okay, 15 minutes. Okay, got it. I think I can do it. Okay, I think I can do it. So, fish story. This one was filtering. This was filtering water. One of the problems in thing is you got diesel fuel. Anytime you have a tropical resort, you got lots of boats and you got leaking stuff. So we created these filters. And so the idea was to use this filter because we had people snorkeling here. We had these fish, and we had this beautiful place where the eels were nesting and different things. So we had this stuff. So I wanted to create this giant filter. And so it was a solar-powered solar chimney, basically. Hot air goes up. It turns all these things. It sucks the water in. It brought it through a series of filters, then gravity fed back down into the lagoon so you could swim nicely. And the fish was a mud daubler, I think, or something that lives there and actually does this. And tried to use the roof form to kind of match the fish. On this particular time, Shangri-La said, you're crazy, Dan, forget it. And it's a stupid story anyway, so forget it. But sometimes the stories still work. Okay, this was a story of, I had a friend in Dubai who had a big piece of property, but it wasn't in the place where most people were developing. Dubai was growing in the opposite direction. So I said, okay, never mind. We can create a story that will save that, right? So what I did was Ibn Battuta. Anybody know Ibn Battuta? He's a famous Middle Eastern explorer, similar to Marco Polo, similar to Cheng Ho, if you know the Chinese admiral Cheng Ho. He's a great explorer and great of the Middle East. So what I said is, Ibn Battuta came through here, right? I don't think so, but anyway, maybe he did. Anyway, and so when he came through here, he loved this particular site that my friend owns because the winds were always blowing. In the desert, that's a big thing, right? Because if you got air, you got movement, that's a good thing. So we said, okay, and we called it wind-kissed, right? So in this particular area, I wrote a story about two gods, eternally separated, right? They can't live on the same because they're wind gods, right? So they have to, it's like the Malaysian monsoons, right? So you got one time they're blowing one way, and the next time they're blowing this way, and so they can't be together. But the thing is, these two gods love each other, and so the winds are not winds, they're actually kisses, right? It's going back and forth. So they're sweet, the sweet nothings that you send to your lover, right? And so to have a wind is a real blessing, right? And so that was the story, and so here it is, and they're having, so I wrote this poetry of Ibn Battuta because, we couldn't find too much that he had really written about it. And then the story and how the winds would work and how all this happened, and shopping centers and different things could go in, even a mosque, right, in there. And we had wind gates and all kinds of stuff that all relate to the story. So winds became the motivation. Now, just luckily or whatever, there was a big university that also was right next door that was built, and he had no problem. His site was sold. But there's two buildings called Wind-Kissed in that particular neighborhood. And it's on the way to Sharjah, so if you know that particular area, it's quite amazing. I used that same concept for Six Senses in Mozambique, and we had this beautiful site. It's an incredible site. And so matter of fact, that is what the dunes look like, you know. And if you have a site like that as an architect, what do? I was so blind. I would say, I don't want to touch this place, right? What can I do to that site to make it better, right? As an architect, can you? No. I mean, look at this. And this dune, I'm telling you, this is wind blowing up. This is sand blowing up. This is 70 meters higher than that. And there's no footing available, right? It's sand, right? So you kind of slide into it. But it's a magical place. And unfortunately, they sold all these properties. Every 300 meters, you know, there's a property, and that went for 100 different house lots. And you know who bought the house lots? The Prince of Netherlands, or of the Dutch Prince Alexander, who's now the king, right? He bought one. Roger Waters, you ever heard of Pink Floyd? Owned one of these sites. I mean, this was going to be the Mystique of Africa, right? Of Mozambique. And it's a beautiful area. Maputo is just across the channel here. And so we were doing the hotel, right? So, and I wanted to use the story of wind because the wind was so incredible there and it did so much. So, I mean, look at, it's just amazing, right? Humbling, to say the least, right? And you know, there's whales migrating. I mean, you can see them from the site. Anyway, so what I started to do is say, okay, first of all, this is Wind Song. The name of the project is Wind Song, and we're going to create all these things that basically run off of wind, right? That catch wind and whatever. But remember, the story is there are two gods of the wind, and they're eternally separated. So they're blowing kisses back and forth, right? So what would be a real tragedy here is to block wind, right? So we had to have things that have gills that allow wind to channel through it and use the power of wind, because, you know, you don't want to block a kiss from a god to another god. You know, you want to use the kiss and then let it move on, right? You know, so that's what we did. So we created this whole thing based on how you could use the wind, and we had radiant cooling in the thing with solar heating in the upper part with solar chimneys and all kinds of stuff. Can you believe it? If you gave this drawing to anybody, they'd say you're crazy, most likely. But it's a cartoon that explains all the mechanical systems, that explains kind of all the artistic features, what you have. You have the Zen solar-powered steam room in the back. You have all this stuff, all done in a very simple, childlike sketch, right? Same for the outside. But the idea was that you don't see these as buildings. You see them just as sculptures in the landscape. And we could create this stuff in a pretty light fashion. So what we were doing is using that sand and actually using balloon formwork. And then casting this stuff on balloon formwork so that we didn't have to destroy the site in the process of creating shelters. And so you can see the whole site is organized by how much wind you can catch. So at the bottom, it's very windy at the ocean. So the buildings don't have to come up so high, but the roofs have to come up a little higher as you move up the hill to catch the winds, right? To catch the blessings. So we did a whole series of these things. You can see everything is based on catching wind and allowing the gills to allow the wind to go through the buildings, to catch the sounds of it, to use the power that it uses to generate more power, to have transparencies, to have the sound of wind blowing through things and creating that whisper. And then even, this was actually through a place where there was, the Zulus had come up and killed a bunch of people. And so this was a burial ground that we had to go over. We couldn't build on it, obviously. And so we created this thing. So it kind of has a bone look to it. But the idea was it was a tuning fork. And so as the wind blows through that form, it actually vibrates and hums in a beautiful song to those who died. This one, okay, I got 10 minutes, so this has got to be fast. But this one is called Reef Walk. Reef Walk is a story, it's a hotel, it's a restaurant. Actually, this is for Shangri-La Maldives, and they have a big island here. This is the executive unit, and so we were going to put something out into the reef. So this is going out into the ocean, and if you know like your old Kalang kind of seafood restaurants where you have the fish baskets and everything. This was based on that concept, right? But it was based on a story, and this is a traditional story of Maldives of reef walking. And reef walking are these guys that actually sit on surfboards, and the surfboards with like nets around them, and they sing this song. They sing in the reef, and somehow fish jump in. You know, when the waves crash over, the fish jump into their nets because they sing songs to the fish, right? And it's called reef walking, and there's only very special people, you know, that can do this kind of thing. But so what we wanted to do was to celebrate that story, right? So we created this thing that goes out into the ocean, and you know, okay, you got the kitchen, but you got the live baskets, you've got a wet area, and you sit around the edges. So all these different seats are different ways to experience it, but you hang over the edge. This is an area which floats, so you're floating right on the water. It has some glass view channels, and so that you're there with the fish, and then we create a beautiful reef too, and we try to rebuild the reef over time so it continues to get more and more beautiful, right? So, and as we did this, and we have this thing that kind of goes out into the water, and it's a beautiful story. And so you can kind of see that even the sculpture in the front, we have this amethyst fish with his mouth open and wind chimes and all the way through, as well as nice places to sit and experience this whole thing called reef walking, right? And so all the details of how you would hang over the side and how you could select your fish right out of the basket, right? Just like the reef walker. Now this is also now this restaurant never got built. Robert Kwok flew over the island and said, "Don't do that one, but do this one for sure." And so this one is Dr. Ali. We wrote a story about this is a true guy who was in Maldives operating as a doctor, and he used to tell people to eat plants to help with certain things, right? He was a naturalist, and he used to be able to take and grow different spices, and he would fix people magically. And it was kind of scary to the government of Maldives, so they thought maybe we better put him on his own island, right? You know, kind of get him away. And so they did. And so what we did, this was a story. This wasn't true. They didn't put him on this island, but because most resorts, they're all buildings, kind of they all look the same, they all were built the same time. So what we wanted to do is create an old mansion with a spice restaurant, or a spice garden, where he grew his stuff, and then renovate it into a restaurant. So we pretended that it was built 100 years ago and then renovated, right? And so that was our sketch of what this thing should be, and that's the real thing that was built. And it's quite an amazing place. And so we believe, you know, it was in the trade routes of the Middle East, and it has all this stuff, and it sits right on the ocean, and it's quite beautiful, and so it has influences of the spice routes and all the different stuff as well. Okay, now this is a water machine, and this is something that I've been working on for some time, and this one's for Cartoon Network, but it could be any client. I try to use it here. Did you notice that in this hotel, we have glass bottles? Now, I see today we have plastic, but usually we have glass, right? And that's a great thing. And I'm really glad that normally we have glass, because this plastic is a real problem, right? Here in Malaysia, you guys have a serious problem with plastic. And it's everywhere. So anyway, that's the only story I have to write about plastic to make you sad enough to stop using plastic, right? That poor bird thought all that plastic was food. And that's a sad story. So, and this is our reality, right? So anyway, the good thing is life continues somehow, right? But the problem is plastic dissolves, it gets into the food chain, the plankton eats the polymer molecules, it dissolves because of sea and salt water and sun, right? And there's no taking out of our fish. It's in our fish, it's in us, right? If we eat fish. We had a wonderful meal last night. Thank you very much for the organizers of this group. But they ate seafood. I didn't eat, I'm vegetarian. But everybody else is eating plastic. So I found this on the internet. I found this machine on the internet. Some Swiss guy had actually said, well, why don't we take the plastic that's out in the sea and we just compress it into these floating things? Well, that's good, except, again, it still dissolves. So we need something to encapsulate the plastic so it doesn't continue to go into the water molecules. But anyway, so I said, okay, well, let's take that a step farther and let's make a resort island out of the trash, right? I mean, if you're going to change the karma of plastic, why not really do it, right? You know, so we created this thing, and then we said, okay, and we can, you know, once we start getting material growing in these little pockets of the plastic, then we can start using it to create soils, and then we can build the plastic into hills that collect water and collect areas for growth. And then we can put a power generating thing using hydrogen power and using photosynthesis as the model for that, and actually burning hydrogen cleanly and using that to create, taking more trash to create more energy. Okay, all right, okay. And so as we go, then by the end, we've got this beautiful monster plastic creature which has had its karma completely changed and is a living, loving place for all us architects to go and visit, right? So, and that's it. So now I'm currently, just if you want to know where I am right now, I'm working for a hotel that's actually building. Now this is actually a Maldivian lagoon, atoll, and we're actually filling it in. We're pumping the sand to create an island. This is the new thing. And it's not quite so good, and it's for the Waldorf, okay? So, and that's what I'm just advising them on, how to make this into, again, a more sustainable, more enriching kind of place. And so I wrote a story about a guy from New York, where the original Waldorf is from, who's now living the life of Manhattan and got sick, right? And so he has to come to the Maldives, and he is magically kind of healed by the power of the beauty of nature. And then he creates his own Waldorf so that he feels like he's still in Manhattan. So he has that lifestyle, but he's making it out of shells and sand instead of Art Deco and marble. All right. Anyway, that's my presentation. Now, what I wanted to point out, though, is that the element that I'm talking about are some traditional stories that we tell, right? That we don't forget. And we can make them up, and we can build on the stories that are there. I mean, you guys don't even know about Coco Joe, right? Now you do, right? And he was a great local character, right? So we need more heroes, I think. In our lives, we need more heroes as architects, right? And so the elements that I'm suggesting, the traditional materials, are the stories that remind us and inform us of our old traditions, as well as new mythologies for us to grow in the future. Thank you very much.